that was the most traumatic experience for me. Was my son didn't recognize me. Mm-hmm. And when I got to think about all the other things, because when you have a traumatic brain injury, you're not yourself. So in all honesty, my unit didn't recognize me. Mm-hmm. My mom didn't recognize me. I mean, I was Candice, but I was not behaving as such. I wasn't speaking as such. Matter of fact, this is a deeper voice than I had before. When I initially got injured, because they went in and fused my neck, and I have a bracket with 6 screws, they nicked a vocal cord. It was paralyzed. So, and that was another thing. My son didn't know my voice because I didn't sound like me. So after the injury, I told my command and I told the doctors, I came into Army whole. I'm leaving the Army whole. So you're going to fix me. This just bottom line. This is what you're going to do. I'm going to stay here until I'm able to go home and care for my child. I was upset because I could see a Blade Runner run on television, but there's nothing for a person that's a right side hemiplegic. There were no leg braces. Mm-hmm. Oh, we can help you walk. That's what we do. So I had to write to a guy in Canada to get the leg brace that I'm wearing right now. I got my classification. My first classification was an international classification, not a national classification. I just wanted to shoot on the home turf just with people like me. Yeah. I won a gold medal with Eric Bennett, who's a Paralympian. This will be his 5th time going to the Paralympics. And then I won an individual bronze medal. And we didn't have doubles at the games. So we did at the championships the year before. And the year before, I won an individual bronze. And then I won a gold mixed teams medal with the Olympic medalist Kevin Mather. And we won the gold. I was so excited. And then doubles, we won a bronze.
Welcome to The Lasting Mission, a podcast dedicated to sharing the powerful stories and experiences of veterans, their families, and supporters. Presented by Mission Roll Call, a nonpartisan movement providing veterans with a powerful, unified voice that is heard by our nation's leaders and communities. For information, visit missionrollcall.org.
I'm Britt Myers, today's host of the Lasting Mission podcast, and I am so excited to be seated here today with one of my favorite people. This is Candice Caesar. She is a U.S. Army veteran and a member of the National Para-Archery Team. So we're so thrilled to have you here today and to hear more about your story, Candice. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, and I think it probably makes sense. There's a lot to cover. You have a very interesting, intriguing story. So many highs, some lows along the way, and I think it'd be best if we start with your service because we want to get into the competition side, the para-archery angle. But tell me a little bit about what inspired you to join the U.S. Army back in the day.
I joined the military because my grandfather was in World War II and my father was a Vietnam veteran. And I thought, why not? I'm a server. I'm a servant, and I believe in serving and helping people. And what better way to help someone than to fight for your country and serve other people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good a reason as any. And so what year was that you joined the Army? And talk me through what happened after you got through basic training. Where'd you go?
Okay, so
if you don't want to date yourself, you don't have to say that.
I went into the Army kind of backwards. So I was in ROTC in college, and I was going to be a commissioned officer, and they were classifying, how do you put it? It's not classifying, but when you graduate, they send you to a different branch, like you are chemical or you are ordnance, and they were doing a lot of chemical. And I didn't want to be a chemical officer, so I decided that I was going to enlist. And so I kind of jumped the gun, and I made sure that when I did sign my contract that I got airborne school because I'm kind of like a daredevil. So I wanted to jump out of airplanes because that's just what you do. You can't just go to the military, not jump out of airplanes. It's boring. Who does that?
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Most of the Army.
Yeah. So you went to basic training. Then what happened after that?
I went to basic training. I went to advanced individual training. I learned my job because I was basically a glorified secretary that jumped out of airplanes. And then after that, you go to airborne school. But I served. I mean, I did my job. I did what I was supposed to do. I enjoyed it, and I didn't want to leave. I decided that while I was serving, I had such a good time. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and become a commissioned officer. I'm going to go become a physical therapist. And I'm going to go to the AMED program and get my degree and then become a commissioned officer. And right before I got ready to go to the AMED program, we had an accident. So that's when I skid on black ice, flipped over 15, 16 times. There were 2 non-commissioned officers seated behind me. And all I remember is as we were headed towards the guardrail, before the axle broke and flipped over, I prayed that God would just relax me for that wreck. And I was relaxed. And when I woke up, I had no idea where I was. And so that was traumatic, waking up in an unfamiliar environment with someone crying over you. And that was my neighbor. My neighbor was the first on the scene. Mm-hmm. I don't know how she found out, but I guess when people, I know my best friend was on duty when the blotter happened, when they said there was an accident with a soldier in the unit. She called my mom. She probably called my friend, or whatnot. They got to the hospital. I opened my eyes. I saw her crying. I did not know why she was crying. I closed my eyes again. When I woke up again, there was someone else that I was familiar with, and I could hear her say, "You don't do that. She's injured." And I didn't have any idea of what that meant. Mm-hmm. And then I opened my eyes again, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's an angel in the corner. And it wasn't an angel. It was Mom. And I didn't really recognize her. Mm-hmm. I couldn't speak to her because I had all these tubes, and I didn't know what had happened. But she gave me a big smile. I was unconscious again. And I would go in and out of consciousness, and then I would have these episodes where I didn't know if I was dreaming or if it was reality. Mm-hmm. All I did know was that I had a son at home, and it's pretty funny because I was married. I didn't remember I was married.
Oh my gosh.
I remembered I had a son. I was like, I need to see my son. I need to see my son, Trevor. And
shout out to your son.
And that was it. It was like, I had a son. Who cares? You got a husband. No, but that's what it was like. Mm-hmm. And that changed my life.
That just had to be so jarring for you. Just like you were saying, one minute you remember being on the road, and then the next minute you wake up in the hospital and someone's crying over you, which, like we talked about before, that probably ramped up the traumatic experience a little bit, just to be like, I don't even know what's going on, and now there's somebody in here crying, like what's happening? When did you first realize what your injuries were, and how did they describe to you what had happened in the accident? Or what were your injuries, I guess, is probably a better question.
I sustained injury to C5, 6, and 7 of my vertebrae, L5, and S1. I have an incomplete spinal cord injury with a traumatic brain injury. All the blood vessels were broken in my right eye, as well as a broken rib and a punctured lung. I am considered a old school terms quadriplegic, new school terms tetraplegic, but I'm incomplete spinal cord, and I suffer with hemiparesis and foot drop. I have Brown-Sequard syndrome, which means I have sensory deficits on the left side of my body, and I have motor deficits on the right side of my body. I didn't know that when I first got injured. I was just strapped to a bed. I didn't know that I was unable to move. I thought that I was just, I don't know what I was thinking, actually.
Well, it's probably the whole thing was shocking. Yeah.
You're just in shock. You've got tubes, you hear beeping sounds, you're in an unfamiliar environment. I was in Germany. They were speaking Deutsch. I thought I was in a Hitler concentration camp. Like, I literally was freaking out. My nightmares were about being sprung from a concentration camp, and that stemmed from just stories and things like that of the Holocaust and whatnot. And I embodied those things. And when I came to, I spoke on those things, and they thought I was insane. I mean, I also had something that's rare. I had right side neglect, and that is when you can't see things on the right side of your body. So it's not that your eye is not working, it's your brain is not. And so it was probably some type of swelling. And so as people would walk by my left field of vision and into my right, I would think they were just getting in the bed with me. Like I couldn't see where they were going. They would just disappear. And so like I remember telling my doctor, there's a whole family living in my bed. We're like, what is wrong with her? And that's what I saw. That's how I comprehended it.
So in those like days and weeks after, you had said that you had a really supportive unit. And I think that was something that was really cool to talk to you about, because when you're a female and then you're a person of color. And so I think, it'd be too easy to say you had kind of the cards stacked against you, especially in the military. But that wasn't really your experience, right? You had it quite differently.
I had a great experience in the military. So I loved every moment of it. My unit was very helpful, especially to my mother. They were very kind to her, and they made sure she had a place to stay. They made sure she had food. She had transportation to and from the hospital. They came to visit me, even though I don't remember them. I don't remember who came to visit me. I remember some things, but not all things. They were just kind, and I'm grateful that I had that experience, because everybody doesn't have a warm experience in the military. Like, I'm an only child. They were my family. Being in the military was the best part of my life, because I had camaraderie, I had structure, I had a purpose. And the moment my accident happened, I couldn't fulfill my purpose, because my body wasn't moving in the way that it probably, I want to say the way that it should, but the way that I am now is the way that I should be.
Yeah.
It's just, that's what I was used to. And I wanted that back. And that's depressing. And so anytime you lose something, you want it back. You want to grieve it. You're angry.
Yeah, so you had to go through that. And you'd said that was one of the harder parts, was not only this injury that you had, but also that this loss of your career and this sense of purpose. And you actually had a really amazing experience in the Army. And like, unfortunately, it prematurely ended your military career, right?
It did. I had a goal. But I think what really devastated me was that I didn't know what I looked like. And I have always been a picture person. So before there was Facebook, there was Candice with a 110 camera, a 126 camera, a 35 millimeter. I had a camera. I was taking pictures, and I was always taking pictures of other people. People took pictures of me, but through this injury, nobody took a picture of me, so I don't know what I look like. But all I wanted was to see my son. That's all I wanted. And my son, they finally bring my son up, and he breaks my mom's nose that day, because he came into the room. I guess my head was swollen. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I look like. But I do know that I had a red eye, and my eye was red. And he was like, that's not my mom. She has a red eye. And when he jumped back, he accidentally hit my mom in the nose.
And broke her nose?
And broke her nose.
Oh, my gosh.
We
Just
Jefferson Caesars got big heads. I don't know. But that was the most traumatic experience for me, was my son didn't recognize me. And when I got to think about all the other things, because when you have a traumatic brain injury, you're not yourself. So in all honesty, my unit didn't recognize me. My mom didn't recognize me. I mean, I was Candice, but I was not behaving as such. I wasn't speaking as such. Matter of fact, this is a deeper voice than I had before. When I initially got injured, because they went in and fused my neck, and I have a bracket with 6 screws, they nicked a vocal cord. It was paralyzed. So, and that was another thing. My son didn't know my voice, because I didn't sound like me. I had an airy voice. I had a posterior glottal tink. That is, the back of your vocal cord is open. It doesn't meet the other vocal cord, and air just escapes. So when you're talking, it's a raspy sound. So I spent years using a voice amplifier, because I also couldn't get volume. And that was hard because I couldn't talk to people without looking like Christina Aguilar. Like I had the little headphone set, but then I had this big box, like a boom box. And you just walk around and you're like, hey, and this box is coming from your hip and people are like,
did you do some
I hear
performances
sound,
too?
but I don't know. It's not coming from her mouth. Yeah. So I wasn't the same. I was not the same person.
Yeah, I mean, in every way, a lot had changed. So when you came back from Germany, what happened? Like, tell me about after you left the military, how were you able to kind of figure out what your next step was going to be? And you, at that point, you required the use of a wheelchair, right?
Okay, so let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So after the injury, I told my command and I told the doctors, I came into Army whole. I'm leaving the Army whole. So you're going to fix me. This just bottom line. This is what you're going to do. I'm going to stay here until I'm able to go home and care for my child. Mm-hmm. And they tried. And so I was in a wheelchair for a while. I had to go through intense therapy at launch stool. I had to learn how to use a flatbed crutch and a cane. And it was very painful. And I had to learn to use my arm, my hand. At the time, my right hand was open and flat. And medieval medicine, I tell you. Well, I remember one of my physical therapists, they took one of those Army flashlights and they tied my fingers to the flashlight. So now my hand closes, but it doesn't open.
Oh.
But it's more useful in this state than it is open-handed because you can't hold anything.
Well, that's your positive outlook coming through because you talked about that earlier when you put your cell phone in your hand and you're like, I mean, can't drop it.
It's great. I can't drop it. Like I'm holding on for dear life. Nothing.
Yeah.
I can't drop a thing. So I had to do that, and I had to go. I had stayed at the hospital, and then I was so depressed being at the hospital that my mom begged my doctors to allow me to go home and rehab at the hospital near where I lived because I lived in Würzburg, and I was in launch stool. That was like 3 hours away. And my unit was 20 minutes. And so every morning I had to get up, and my place of duty was the hospital, and I stayed in the hospital all day. Unfortunately, I don't know why I asked for this because it would have been so much easier to stay there. I lived on the 3rd floor in my housing, and I had to get up and down those stairs. And so they had to rig things to get me up. It would take me an hour and a half to get up the stairs. And it would take me about an hour to get down the stairs.
You just
Every
didn't want
day.
to be moved. You're
And
like,
whether I had
to the lower floor.
to be scooted, they had to pick me up one step, I think that was instrumental in rehabilitation because I had to do that every day. That's something that the physical therapist, nobody asked me, what are your living conditions at home? And I had to do that. And I didn't want my mom to hurt because my mom's older. Mm-hmm. You know, I was in my 20s. She was in her 40s, 50s. Now that I'm in my 50s, I realize that it's not too old. But then you're like, oh my God, she's decrepit.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my God. But I didn't want to be a burden on her. So that was another thing. I don't want to be a burden. Mm-hmm. I don't want a caregiver. I've got to do all that I can do to take care of myself. And so my husband and my mom would walk me down the stairs, try to get me up the stairs. It was bad. And so then I got to a place where I could leave the wheelchair alone because I thought that was a death sentence. And then I walked with a flatbed crutch and a cane. And then once I got to a place where I thought I was okay, I had to ship my son home. And that was detrimental to my health. The fact that I couldn't raise my own kid. I had to send my son to live with my mom while I got better. That was horrible. So I was like, my ultimate goal is to get home. I'm the parent. I have to raise him. So I left the military. Let me back up. Mm-hmm. That's not true. While I was in therapy, I had a speech therapist, I had an occupational therapist, and a physical therapist. My physical therapist told me, even with a certified a PTA, you cannot be a physical therapist. That dream is gone. That ship has sailed. And so my speech therapist was like, yeah. She was excited about that because she started talking to me about speech therapy and what she did.
She's recruiting
And
already.
she was recruiting. Mm-hmm. And so when I was able to read again, I didn't tell you earlier, but I couldn't read. So I didn't know what letters, the formula, I could not read. What you see now as a letter, I saw as shaky ants. That's what it looked like. It looked like they moved. I kind of think of it as like having a form of dyslexia, but I didn't know I couldn't attach that symbol to the letter. So I didn't know it was an A, didn't know what it sounded like, so I definitely couldn't read. So once I was able to get that, because speech therapists trained me, cognitive rehabilitation, helped me with my memory, because my memory is horrible, and she gave me strategies. From there, I went back to my unit, and that's where life as I knew it changed. Then they treated me differently. I was an invalid. Soldiers don't get wounded. They pet you up and they put you back on the field. This is before 9/11. So you have to remember, we didn't have all this extra technology, because even though war is bad, out of every war comes great technology and new advancements in science. So we don't have that. And here I am, unable to do anything. I can't pick up a weapon because it's too heavy. I can't wear my BDUs because they're too heavy on my body. I can't talk to my soldiers because they can't hear me, even with a voice amplifier. And they're treating me different. Nobody wants to listen to what I have to say. And I was a non-commissioned officer. I was one of those people that worked alongside of my soldiers. Yes, I'm telling you what to do, but I can do it. I can do what you can do, and I could probably do it better. Yeah. That's who I was.
Yeah.
And to be unable to do that was a hard hit. And when I got back to my unit and they moved me out of my office and away from my soldiers into what they consider the orderly room, just a place where the first sergeant and the commander resided, that's not what I signed up for. That's not what I want to do. And then they said, well, you can stay in the military. You can be an instructor. You can teach. I don't want to be a teacher. I played school when I was a kid. My mom said I'd be a teacher. No, I don't want to do that. Because my mom said I was going to do it. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Of course, here I am. I teach, but
It always,
that's not
you
what I
end up
wanted
doing
to do.
what your mom wants you to do.
Right.
At the
That's
end.
not what I wanted to do. So that was painful. And when my neurosurgeon said, hey, I'm retiring, I was like, well, you're the last of my support system. Then I need to get out too. And I decided that I was going to go back to school. I had looked through the job outlook. Back then, that's what we did. We looked through job outlook books. And I decided that I was going to be a speech language pathologist because the outlook for it was good.
Now
And
your
it was
speech therapist is like, I got her.
yes. And
Locked
so
her in.
that's what I did.
That's awesome. I mean, you were able to find something that you did have. You could apply that same passion to. And you had also told me earlier was that about the time you got connected with Team Red, White, and Blue? Or when did you start getting into this? You have you're working on your mental health, right? You're trying to get yourself back to a good place. And then it was also this the physical side of it too, which you were still dealing with. You're still dealing with today, obviously. But
Oh, no. So, no. That wasn't even close. So when I got out of the military, the first thing I did was I went back to school. That was the first thing I did. So I was a student that couldn't walk to campus. I mean, transition from the military to civilian life is already hard because you're not trained to work with civilians. So I was missing all of that. I couldn't connect with the military because I wasn't a typical soldier getting out. I couldn't connect with the people that I was 8 years older than, and they have different cares. I'm a parent. I'm now divorced. I have a kid at home. I am trying to make sure that I put food on the table to take care of him. That is what I was doing. So I got out of the military in 2002. So from 2002 to 2004, I was an undergraduate student because I had college before I went in. I got my 2 degrees. I was able to read. I got a degree in psychology and communication disorders. And then I took a year or 2 off before my master's, and I wanted to spend some time with my kid because I felt like I was neglecting him because I was in school.
Yeah.
And I worked a full-time job. I was a veteran service office coordinator at the University of Houston. So I started off as a work study, And that was my family. So I went from having a unit to another unit because we were at school, we worked in the office, and we told veterans about their benefits. So that's what I did. So then I did that. Still not doing sports because I'm taking care of my kid. I don't have time for that.
Yeah, your
Then I
schedule
go to
sounds a little
graduate school.
packed. Yeah.
Right? So then I've got to go to graduate school. I go to graduate school. I'm still healing, but I'm not healing because I'm depressed. My focus is on him. My identity is his. I'm the Boy Scout leader. I'm the soccer mom. I'm the football mom. I'm his mom. Matter of fact, I had a hat and shirt that said his name and I'm his mom because that was my identity. So I went from being a soldier to his mom. Yes, I'm disabled, but we're not focused on that yet. Deep down inside, I know I am. I'm crying every night. I'm depressed, but I can't let him see it because he's my kid. I'm angry because it's happened to me. This is unfair. I don't want this. This is not the life that I signed up for. So, although I initially started my journey, God helped me, I kind of lost him. And it wasn't that I lost my faith. I was still going to church, but I didn't lean on God. And I didn't lean on anybody except my mom and my aunt. That was it. And I just did that stuff. So let's fast forward. So my son goes from kindergarten to his senior year in high school. And somehow I remember my doctor telling me that I would never walk again. And I remember the day that he told me I would never walk again, I said to him in all faithfulness that you do not know who my Heavenly Father is. I'm going to walk a marathon. Now, looking back on that, I thought it was the dumbest thing I could have ever said in my life. Because who does a marathon? 26.2 miles? Like, I didn't know it was that far. I just thought, I don't know what I thought a marathon was.
Like, it can't be that bad.
I had no, like maybe I thought a marathon was a 5K, I don't know. But 3.1 miles, but no, it's 26.2 miles. And I said, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do. You know what? I need to start training. As soon as this kid gets his license, because in case something happens while I'm training, I need somebody to take me to the hospital. So, I mean, I'm a thinker.
You're looking ahead, yeah.
I'm a thinker. So I'm like, I need somebody to take care of me. All right, kid. And I went and I would get up early in the morning on Saturdays and I would go train. And I will never forget, I would fall on my face after a 6-mile run. Halfway through the 6-mile run, I'm tripping over my foot because the military and the veteran affairs, they didn't give me anything. I had to beg for it and I still didn't get it. I was upset because I could see a Blade Runner run on television, but there's nothing for a person that's a right side hemiplegic. There were no leg braces. Oh, we can help you walk. That's what we do. So I had to write to a guy in Canada to get the leg brace that I'm wearing right now. And I paid for it out of my own pocket, and that's what I used. And when I started getting better and I started running, so now I've done my first marathon, and I'm like, oh my gosh, who's this? Oh, Team Red, White, and Blue. Oh my gosh. Oh, I do another half marathon. I do a 10K. I do a 5K. What is this? I'm like, hey. So I go up to somebody. I'm like, hey, tell me about Team Red, White, and Blue. And I was like, this is what I need in my life. I need to be around a bunch of people that like veterans, a bunch of veterans, parents of veterans, siblings of veterans, just people, a community. This is what I need in my life. And I got hooked up with Team Red, White, and Blue, and every time I would go out of town to go to a race, I would get in and plug in into Facebook and be like, hey, I'm Houston chapter, Team Red, White, and Blue, Team RWB. I'm coming to your town. And people would meet me. They would run with me. I lived in San Antonio when I got my IDEO for 6 weeks. I rode bikes with them. I mean, they took care of me.
How cool.
It was like a home away from home. So that was my first bonding experience after the military.
Yeah, finding that sense of community.
Finding that sense of community.
Well, you did a great plug for us because we love Team Red, White, and Blue at Mission Roll Call, and we're going to be having them on the Lasting Mission podcast here in one of our next episodes. So that's great to hear. I mean, that's the point of their mission, right, is to help veterans and service members, their families, find a sense of community in that tribe again, which was something that you really needed. And I can't even imagine how difficult that was with all the other stuff you were juggling. I also can't believe after you realized it was a full marathon, 26.2 miles, that you signed up for more of them and kept going. I would have been like, well, that was just a mistake and I'll never do that ever again. But you were doing that while you still had, is it foot drop or is it drop?
I still have foot drop.
Yeah. So can you explain to people what that means? Like what that does for when you're trying to plant your foot and run or walk? What was that like?
Foot drop is just that. Your foot is basically your foot and your leg. Well, I can't do it with this hand, but this is your leg and your foot. So your foot is usually like at a 90-degree angle. And you push down, but when you go to walk, you lift your foot up. Well, my foot just hangs. Mm-hmm. And so in order to get clearance from my toes and the ground, I would lift my whole leg and it just pops on the ground and it's just nothing that you can do. Mm-hmm. And so I have a brace that cushions it, and as I push down, it pops it back up for me. And let me tell you, I went through a lot of braces. So not just this brace, but I got shocked. I won't bore you with being shocked, but I had a device that I wore that shocked me every time my tibia moved. So at every movement, it shocks you and it picks your foot up.
To try to correct it?
And it just, it picks up the foot drop. It's amazing. It's great if you like being shocked. And so I got shocked like 2,000 times. And you know what? I ran probably about 30 half marathons with that.
Yeah, how many half marathons? Because you sort of skated over that part. Where did you run your half marathons, Candice?
So I did 24 marathons. I've done the Boston Marathon 4 times. I actually qualified and competed in the mobility impairment division. I've hand cycled some marathons like the Boston Marathon, like the Marine Corps Marathon. I ran it and I hand cycled it. The Detroit Free Press, where you go over into Canada. I've done that. It's
triathlons?
Yeah, I've done 14 triathlons, and I've done 100 half marathons and a half marathon in all 50 states in D.C.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's just I did one half marathon. No, actually 2, and I told you the one I threw up the last 3 miles, and I never ran after that again. So I don't even know what to say to you at this point. Yeah.
You're a slacker.
I am a slacker.
You're a slacker.
It's true.
No, I did those because at first I was proving that I could do something. And then after that, it just became who I was. Mm-hmm. And the endorphins that are released when you do physical activity, so I'm a huge advocate for sports. Those endorphins, when your heart rate is really high, gives you like a high. It's just like, yes, I feel good. I've accomplished something. I'm nice and I'm sweaty. Let me go take a shower, but I feel great.
Yeah. I mean, it's just remarkable what all you've been able to accomplish. And you just don't stop, because that could have been enough, right? You could have been like, I did it. I learned to walk again. Go back to that doctor, by the way, and be like, remember what you said to me? Well, I've done a half marathon in all 50 states in D.C. and triathlons, and I not only walked but ran. And I don't know if you've ever done the Boston Marathon, but I have. That's what I would do. I would go back there, but I'm a little more...
Oops.
Yeah, on the other side of things, I guess, is probably not the best advice. But when did you get into, because you didn't just stop, like I said, with the marathons, the half marathons, the triathlons. Talk to me about this journey to para-archery.
So my journey to para-archery is quick and simple. So my run life was from 2015 to COVID. Mm-hmm. COVID, I was out on a training run, training for to finish my 50 states, to finish my 100. Actually, it was never a goal to do 100. I was just going to finish the 50 states. But by the time I finally finished, I was at 89 half marathons. And I was like, dude, I got to stop on an even number. And most people are like, stop at 90. Yeah. I'm like, no, 100. That's even. So I was out on a training run. I had to call home a mile and a half. COVID, can't go to the hospital. So I have a wheelchair so I got in a wheelchair, and that's what I did. And so that's when let me go back. I identified as a paralyzed veteran back in when I was doing triathlons because I met members of PVA then. So now I've got a bigger tribe. So I've got Team Red, White, and Blue. I've got Dare to Try. They had a military camp. Then I've got Paralyzed Veterans of Americas. I've got the Achilles Freedom Team. So I'm meeting all these different groups while I'm already active. And so with the PVA, and I'm glad that I had them, I hand cycled all through COVID. Like I hand cycled about, 100 miles a week.
Oh my gosh.
Like I would get on the trainer and we'd hand cycle, or I'd go out in the park and I'd go hand cycle away from people because I couldn't run. So that's what I did. And I found joy in it. And then one of my friends who is a paralyzed veteran, one day I was going to work, once COVID was over, said, hey, we're having a camp for archery. We're bringing the inpatients out on an outing. Would you like to come? I'm like, dude, I got to go to work. So I canceled all my patients and I went to this archery camp.
That a girl. I was going to say, did you go to work?
I did not.
Yes. Good job.
I did not. I played hooky from work. And then I shot a compound bow and I liked it.
What's a compound bow?
Actually, this was right before COVID. I take that back. This is right before, because they let the hospital people out. So this is right before COVID. And the reason I didn't get into archery was because I was doing all the running. And I didn't have time for it because I was running. It was cool. I went out and I bought a bow, and I was like, this is something I could do in my free time. But then I just don't have time for it. So then COVID hit, and then it was like, oh, what are you going to do?
You're like, no, unfortunately, I have time.
I can sit in my backyard and I can shoot a target. I can, So what ended up happening was we have things like Challenge Athletes Foundation, and there's 8 Angel City Games. So these are games, Endeavor Games. These are games for people with disabilities that I didn't even know about. And the military had games, and I didn't know. Nobody told me. I guess you have to research it. And they ended up doing them virtually. So we had wheelchair racing, we had weightlifting on. Also, there's wheelchair games, veteran wheelchair games. And I had been to the National Veteran Wheelchair Games. And then they made it virtual because it was COVID. And so you would take 15 ounces of vegetables out of your pantry. And so that would be your discus or your whatever you call that thing. What is it?
Oh, the shot put?
Okay, shot put.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you. And you
I was like,
would
that sounds
sit in a
dangerous.
chair and you would like throw it. And then you would measure, you'd roll in your wheelchair through the grass and you would measure it, and then you send in the results. And you're competing with other people who are competing at home.
Was this
and
the
you have to
honor
take,
system?
Yeah, you had to take pictures of video.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so unless you're like a real video editor, so you could
Cheating,
cheat.
yeah.
Right. So I'm sure somebody cheated. I didn't. I got my medals, honestly.
There you go.
And so I was doing this in my backyard, and that's what kept me going during COVID. And so then one of the events was archery. And so I did archery, and then a friend hooked me up and was like, hey, are you in touch with these people who do archery? And I'm like, no, I haven't. No. And they're like, you should try it. So I went out and I tried it and loved it. Now, there are 2 kinds of bows. There is a compound bow. That is the one that you would see hunters typically, not a crossbow. That's cheating. A real compound bow. So you have a release aid. It has cams. It has a sight.
Weighted? Is that the one that's like hard to pull?
Well, when you pull it,
really
it's
heavy?
not real. They're not hard
For
to
the
pull if
average
you're
person.
strong, okay? They
Well,
come
I'm
in
not.
different pounds.
Do you see
You
these
were-
flimsy?
So
It would be hard for me. I think.
No, it's just people think you're supposed to pull back a 45-pound bow. You don't. You can pull a 15-pound bow. Kids pull bows back. So, they have them for everybody. So I started with a 30-pound bow. It had, they say 80% let off. Basically, I'm holding like 3 pounds. And I have a release aid, and I hit it, and then, whoo, the arrow would go. That was so exciting. It's like shooting a gun, but not. And so that was my first experience to archery. Later, I became more like Robin Hood. Robin Hood basically has a bare bow. It's what they call a recurve. Now, when you put a sight and stabilizers on it, that's an Olympic recurve. That's what I shoot. Okay. And that's shot at 70 meters, compound shot at 50. I started shooting at 50 meters with the compound. Loved it. And when I decided I wanted to shoot with people with disabilities, people who were para-athletes, they didn't explain it to me. Nothing that
Seems to be a recurring
Yeah,
theme.
that's the thing. So I got my classification. My first classification was an international classification, not a national classification. I just wanted to shoot on the home turf just with people like me. That wasn't the case because I got an international. So once you get international, now you're going abroad. You're shooting against everybody in different countries.
Whoops. So good practice.
It's great practice, but you got to have the skill. So I started archery 3 years ago, not with that skill set.
Competing against
Just
world
competing. So I'm
athletes.
learning to shoot and compete at the same time. And that's not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to learn how to shoot. You shoot local, you shoot state, then you shoot national, then you shoot international. I did
You
it
just
all
went
backwards.
right to the top.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Per usual.
I didn't know. I didn't research enough.
Okay, so then what happened after that point? So you realized this is something that you really liked. You're shooting whatever both those bows are that you call them. Compound, I remember. What's the other one called?
I love compound. So the problem was when I got classified, I had to switch to get classified to go on this self-funded trip with the team. And so I had 3 months to pick up a recurve. You need more than 3 months to learn how to shoot a recurve, let me just tell you. And once I picked it up, I just couldn't put it down because it was a challenge. There are no right hemiplegics that shoot with both arms. They usually shoot with a mouth tab or they shoot a compound. And it was a challenge for me to get inside the bow and try to balance. And that's what's making it so difficult for me because I probably should go back to a compound. I might, but right now I have learned so much with my Olympic recurve and I've won so many medals with my Olympic recurve that I think I kind of want to stay with that.
I think you should. Well, let's hear about your medals because you said you compete both as an individual and then I've messed this name up so many times, but then you were on a mixed team, correct? Did I get it right? Yes. Okay, so tell me about that and competing at the Pan Am Games, and you were there on behalf of Team USA, which is so cool. Obviously, we're in the midst of the Olympics now and Paralympics coming up, but just tell me a little bit about that because I think that is swoon-worthy. Sorry, I just hit my mic, but
Let me just tell you, the Pan American Games is like a mini Olympics. It comes every 4 years. It's on a smaller scale because it is a continental event. So it's North and South America. So we got people from Canada, everywhere, Mexico, South America, Brazil. And you get to see other people from Team USA, other paras that are in different sports. Like you eat with them, even though you don't know them, but you get to meet them. Like, well, let me back up. So I know people. Because I talk to people, I do different things. I had a different background. So the triathletes that were there, I knew them, so I could talk to them. The track people, I knew them, talked to them. And murder ball, because most of the veterans do wheelchair rugby. So I knew them. I met a wheelchair athlete that does powerlifting. I got to see her. And so I got to see them, and I could go watch them do their sport and then go do my own. So it was awesome. The only problem is you got to walk like a mile to go eat. And you have to walk a mile back to your room. So you have to time it just right. You're like, if I'm going to walk a mile to go eat, it needs to be like 15 minutes before I have to get on the bus, which is in that area, instead of walking back. But to see people from different countries with all kinds of disabilities, like I saw a guy who walked on the sides of his feet because he couldn't move. And he's walking. He's not even in a wheelchair. And I'm like, oh, my God. And he's slow. And he's got to make this mile trek. Like, it was inspiring to me to see other people missing limbs and whatnot. I'm sorry, that's not what you asked me.
No, but that is a good point because you mentioned like going to competition. You just like really painted this picture earlier about how people find a way. I mean, you have people that are missing limbs, and just tell me a little bit more about that. Like people, what's the mouthpiece?
A mouth tab. So a mouth tab is like a piece of material that they put on a string. And so I'm going to demonstrate. So you basically pick up a bow and you would pull it with two hands like this. Mm-hmm. If you're shooting compound,
I know I did that too.
So if you're shooting compound, you pull back and your hand faces this way, and then you use your release aid, okay? So if you don't have one of your arms, you put your mouth on the tab, and then you fish the ball, and then you open it. If you're a compound person instead of a mouth tab, you can hook it. I am so sorry. If you can hook it to a harness that is a release aid itself, you aim, and then, like my friend, she uses a mouthpiece, but it's not on the string. It's just hooked to her guard, and then it flies.
And you have somebody that shoots with his feet?
Yeah.
Is that right?
There are a couple of archers that shoot with their feet because they don't have arms. But you have to realize, so it's different when you have a congenital disability versus an acquired one. So he's lived his whole life without arms. So everything he does is he cuts fish with his feet, He works on his car with his feet. Like, that's just amazing,
It is.
just, oh my
The
gosh.
adaptability, for
But
sure.
today, if both my arms got chopped off and I had to use my feet, oh my God. Yeah, I mean, but if I was born that way and that's all that I know, during the Paralympic trials, he asked me, Candice, how much do you think I would weigh if I had two arms? I was like,
Like, am I allowed to
wait a
answer
minute.
this?
Like, hold on. So, like, if you got arms, that means you got shoulders, you've got the elbow, you've got your wrist. I'm like, dang, I don't know how much these body parts typically weigh. That was a great question because he has no idea.
Yeah.
So,
How are you supposed to answer that? That is a tricky one. So you were at the Paralympic trials.
yeah, I was at the Paralympic trials. I won. I just didn't have a start to the Paralympics, or I wouldn't be going
Yeah.
August 28th through September 8th.
August 28th through September 8th. Are any of your fellow competitors going this year?
Oh, yeah. Yes. And that's funny. So we're a family. And that's what I like about parasports. We are a family. So although my competitors, like from Peru, Colombia, they're my friends. So when I go to these competitions, yes, I want to beat them. But I also want to share in the experience, and we have fun together. And so, yeah, they're going to be there. I'm going to be watching. I'm going to be cheering. And I'm like, bring home a medal for the Americas.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have people that are Americans that are shooting, but in my division, we don't have a American para female recurve or compound going to the Paralympics. We have a W1 category, and that's somebody that's in a wheelchair that has both upper body and lower body extremity and core. So it's one arm, two legs, and core. If something happens to my left leg, I am now a W1. We don't want anything to happen to me.
No, we don't.
Okay. So, and then we have the men. The men always go. But it's not a lot of women. It's not a lot of women that show up to the sport and stay.
Yeah.
And
So you're leading the way still. Yeah.
And I'm celebrating every woman. So I don't care what country you're from. Well, I take that back because I kind of am partial to the Americas.
Yeah.
I want the Americas
Yes.
to be
USA.
Europe and Asia and Africa and Oceania. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You
Even
don't
though
have to
I
tell
have
me which
friends,
ones you'd leave out. Yeah.
and I hope my friends from Australia are not paying attention
Yeah.
because I love them, but if one of my America people come to take you out, then yeah.
How'd you end up doing at the Pan Am Games? How'd you
You
fare?
know what? I did pretty good at the Pan Am Games.
Yay.
I won a gold medal with Eric Bennett, who's a Paralympian. This will be his fifth time going to the Paralympics. And then I won an individual bronze medal. And we didn't have doubles at the games. So we did at the championships the year before. And the year before, I won an individual bronze. And then I won a gold mixed teams medal with the Olympic medalist Kevin Mather, and we won the gold. I was so excited. And then doubles, we won a bronze in doubles.
That is awesome, especially considering on that timeline you gave, you really didn't get into archery until the 2000s, right? Late 2000s.
This is 2024. I started in 2021.
Yeah. That is
Yeah, it's
incredible.
pretty-
Yeah, you should give yourself a little pat on the back for
I need to
that.
give myself a little grace.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about some of your favorite experiences? Like, have you met any athletes, para-athletes or Olympic athletes, or even, anybody that's competing at the international or national level that's really
yeah.
inspired you or that stands out?
Well, I can't say that they inspired me
Yeah.
per se, but like Tatiana McFadden, I met her at Boston. We have selfies together, took pictures with her. Melissa Stockwell's my favorite. We laugh, we've broken bread together. She's taught me some tricks in the pool. I mean, I've got some people that are going, I can't remember off the top of my head, like their last names, but there's some rugby players that I met that I know that I'm pretty excited about, wheelchair rugby that is, that, we've broken bread together. And one of them, Mason, this will be his first Paralympics. I'm so excited.
That is amazing. You're going to be back here cheering them on.
Oh, definitely.
So what do you think, what's next for you? I know we've talked about this where you're kind of trying to figure out how to chart this next part of your path, and you've done the Paralympic trials, you've done the Pan Am Games. Like, are you eyeing Los Angeles in 2028? Are you trying to figure out what that next step is, or what's on the docket for you?
You know what? Something that I learned during my journey, throughout my entire journey, was I started doing it originally for my kid. And then I started learning to be me. And my purpose now is to do whatever God wants me to do. And if he wants me to go to LA 2028, that's where I'm going. But I cannot, in good faith, tell you exactly what's happening. The last 2 years have been the hardest for me because my mom passed away. And the year before she passed away, my aunt passed away. The hardest part was going to the Pan American Championships. My mom passed away when I was at an archery event. My aunt passed away the first trials that I participated in. And that was my support system. Going back to the games in the same country, because they were both in Chile, that same time of year, was hard for me. But I was still able to do it. But I didn't do it by myself. I did it with the help of God. And so because I leaned on my faith, I decided this year, and let me tell you, I medaled, I did great there. But every competition after that, it was horrible. I didn't shoot half as well as I had been shooting. I haven't had time to heal. And I didn't lean on God. And so the last 2 events, I've really been leaning on God. Like, I just won a bronze medal with my doubles partner in Czech Republic. We were the only 2 that won a medal from America. And it was like, yeah, we did this. Yes. We're the underdogs. But we did this.
And maybe that's enough, right? It doesn't have to be, the next thing. And it's good for you being able to discern what's best for you. And that's something we talked about before is you were Candice the soldier. You were Candice who had this debilitating and life-changing injury happen to you. You're Candice the mom, Candice the speech pathologist, Candice the para-archery athlete. And where are you now? Like, where is the time to discover what that next thing is for you? And I think that's what this next part is about. And if you'll do me the honor of reminding me of your service. So when did you join? The accident happened in 19...
I joined the military 20 May 1994. The accident happened 5 December 1999. I was on terminal leave beginning January of 2002. I was medically retired. They backdated it to February of 2002.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so you had said you had one of the best experiences of your life was joining the military, but what advice would you give to somebody who's considering that path, and what about that transition time to civilian life? So to factor in both of those things, right?
The advice I would give somebody wanting to join the military is if that's what you want to do, do it. If you don't want to join the military, don't. But do realize that it is a sacrifice. You are giving of yourself. And if you're not the type of person that's willing to make a sacrifice for the person next to you, to give your life for the person next to you, don't do it. You're going to go through some hardships. You're going to go through trials. And everything is not going to be peachy keen. It's just not. It's just not the way life is designed. But if you're willing to make that sacrifice, I encourage you to do so, because you learn so many more life lessons. You learn so many more life lessons in the military than you do just sitting in your local neighborhood, going to Starbucks, doing your typical thing.
Yeah, and you especially had that extra hurdle of dealing with an injury during your transition. But what advice would you give to somebody who might be experiencing that same moment of time right now, whether they are injured or not, and they're getting ready to leave the military? For you, it sounds like finding that sense of community was a big part of it, but what advice would you give?
Expect nothing. Research everything. Because the military is about indoctrinating you into a different way of life. They do not transition you out of that life. And it's like almost like a brainwashing. So you're going to be different when you come out. And you really have to find your tribe. That's what I tell people all the time. You need to find God. Not the God that I'm looking for, not the God that the man next door, not religion, not a church. That's not what I want you. I want you to find and have a relationship with him, because he can get you through places that nobody else can. And then if you have some type of mental health problem, get a professional. Seek professional help. Find your community.
Yeah, I think you've done that. I think you're continuing to build that too. And I know I speak for all of us at Mission Roll Call just to say how grateful we are to hear your perspective and your experiences, and really to applaud all that you've overcome and continue to overcome, Candice. And it's really inspirational. And so regardless of if you decide to be in Los Angeles 2028, or if you're going to go to the next Pan Am Games or whatever is next on the docket for you, I know we're going to be cheering you on. I know you're going to be doing it in an excellent way, just as you have with all other things. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective and your story, especially as a female veteran. It's always great to hear that side of things as well. And we're just grateful to have you on the Lasting Mission. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.